To lead off, I'd like to, having all of the panelists are introduced, maybe Caitlin, I'll start with you. And when you look at the world of, in India, let's focusing on that to start with, we can draw lessons from elsewhere as well. What are things and trends you see in technology which, in your opinion, are going to be the most disruptive for companies and organizations in India?
So thanks for that. I think one of the biggest trends we see is the necessity to blend technology. Well, so I'll start by saying that we focus mostly on the K-12 sector, so I'll focus there and say we see it that it's very necessary to blend technology into the classrooms and to put the emphasis on implementation and teacher training. So often what we've seen is that technology's kind of been layered on top, or it's been seen as kind of an enticement for parents to sign up to private schools, but we think that in order for the technology to truly be effective, it has to be embedded into schools and has to have a theory of pedagogy. So embeddedness into schools is one of the major themes. The second one is that we think that education technology really needs to focus on being able to demonstrate learning outcomes or to prove its efficacy. And so being able to make very specific progress in learners' lives through that.
That's useful to know. And I think what you're referring to is that technology to the end of driving better quality and more accessible education is something of interest personally to you, and you believe that's a key driver for innovation or disruption in India.
Yes, that's right. And at every segment of the market, actually.
Absolutely. So that's a good starting point. Before we get too deep into it, maybe just quickly understanding from you, Tanmoy, when you look at, from your perspective, and give us a couple of lines of background on what metal does so we can contextualize your answer, and then provide us an understanding of how you see in India any technological changes which are going to disrupt other companies that exist already, and how your company might succeed now given the technologies you're using. So the trick is to keep it short.
Sure. So Metal is an online assessment platform to help companies conduct tests. Now tests can be to do with recruitment tests, training, certification, education, and all sorts of tests. So one of the key differentiators that Metal as a company is bringing to the table is that it is solving a lot of operational issues of conducting a test. It is making the process of conducting a test very, very simple, easy, and affordable. India, by definition, has been an assessment company. So I've been a product of the Indian education system, and I've gone through numerous tests that I have to appear to qualify to get into a university. In order to appear for that test, I have to go through a lot of mock tests. So I've done hundreds of tests in my life, and I believe there's a big need of a technology-enabled platform which can be very simply delivering these tests. The other bit is, if let's say testing is a service, then technology can really help render the service of from being a pen and paper based test to an online technology based test with much higher quality. And I can just give you a couple of examples from Metal. So we on Metal give you a capability to create a virtual exam hall. What it does is, if you want to create a high stakes test where you also want invigilation to happen, you can set it up a virtual exam hall, which is like a CCTV camera interface set up on your browser. So let's say if you want to visit a campus to do a recruitment or run a certification test over hundreds of people from all over the country, so you can have them sit at their homes or at their desktops and log on to your test site, which is hosted by Metal, and still be able to invigilate them, have physical exam center like control, but you will be able to do that virtually through Metal. So that is one. It solves a lot of operational issues. The other thing is, we have a lot of simulators which enhances the quality of measurement. So in order to measure let's say an IT skilled worker like a coder or a programmer, we have simulators to make him code on the platform, and then once the candidate submits the code, his or her code is automatically evaluated on a number of parameters. So I would say technology, especially in my experience, is really serving these two fundamental needs. One is it is really taking care of the operational issues and taking care of the quality issues. So it is really enhancing the quality.
Ben, would it be great to understand what role YouTube in particular is thinking of playing and is actively playing, and how, in enabling, in India, disruption in education?
Sure. So I mean, the platform is really has been thriving a lot on core content of music and entertainment. I think it's become a primary way for people to discover new music and a way to be entertained. I think here in India, with a lot of TV and film content on the platform, and in the past year, about $500 million in investment globally into businesses or channels operating in the ecosystem. And I think it's what we kind of see as somewhat delicious content. And on the nutritious side, so being informed or learning content, it's more of a developing space. There's not as much activity. I think for education, we see about 1,000 channels globally. Just under 1 million videos actually uploaded in an EDU context. Kind of breaking that down and looking at the India market, there's been some success in the family entertainment, kids, or edutainment space, I should say, in preschool. And so we have a partner in Bombay who's one of our top partners globally. And so I think there's been a big opportunity for people here, not just kind of exposing their business operations to the domestic India market, but also to the global market and reaching to the 1 billion people on YouTube. I think in terms of activity and investment, less so in terms of K-12 and looking at class augmentation for the K-12 education experience. And so I think for us, we would still say it's early days, and for the type of content I mentioned before is somewhat delicious. It's a big opportunity. It's an area that we want to put more focus and actually work with partners to jointly develop this ecosystem together.
Great. So as you make progress in that, Rajiv, we've talked about how adaptive learning and big data analytics supporting adaptive learning is a driver of change that you are bringing to education in India. Could you tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing at eDreams EduSoft and how that's panning out for India?
Sure. Thanks, Sandeep. So we are an education technology company focused on K-12 education, on personalized learning, or what is better known, adaptive learning. We believe every learner is unique, and whether you provide homogeneous content in form of questions and videos, or you provide animated content in classrooms, it is not really able to cater to personalized need of each child. Even if you serve that content in mobile sort of platforms, either in tablet or mobile, it just brings convenience but not personalization. So what we do at our company is build algorithmic content which is created on the fly to a learner in a given context, exactly in the same manner as a human would do when a human is sitting next to the learner in a one-on-one teaching learning scenario. As a human, we don't have videos and questions recorded in our mind that we serve to the learner when learner is sitting with us. In a given context, how he's learning, what difficulty he's facing, how to explain to him, after explanation, what question to be asked to him, everything is dynamic as a teacher or as an instructor. And we are trying to emulate exactly the same thing using artificial intelligence and machine learning in our product called FunToot. Right now it is live with 25,000 kids in 40-50 schools in India. The challenge that we are facing for our product to kind of run successfully is infrastructure. It is not easy to provide a one-on-one access device either in form of tablet or personal computer to each child either at home or in school. It is extremely difficult proposition in the best of the schools in India. So we are fighting our battle, and we are trying to solve that problem in terms of convincing the buyer to invest in additional infrastructure. We also have sort of come up with a kind of hybrid cloud computing solution wherein you don't need internet in a school premises to run this one-on-one access for adaptive learning. I think so. That's pretty much from my side. Our fundamental belief continue to be that every learner eventually would need to have a personalized instructor, if not in human form, then in technology form. Thank you.
So I want to highlight, Rajiv, thanks for this. One of the challenges that we, when we meet companies, they come across in bringing technology of any form to, let's start with the school, then we can get into higher education as well, is related to teachers and their willingness to take on technology, use it effectively, and deliver that. Would you shed some light on that? And anybody, maybe Caitlin or Ben, you, whoever's starting, looking at a lot of K-12 as their target market? Any one of you?
Yeah, so I can start. I mean, one of the things that we've seen to be really important is that technology often cannot replace the teacher, at least in terms of a one-to-one context. So instead, what technology is really effective at is at changing the role of the teacher. And what we found, and this is research from the professor, Dr. John Hattie out of the University of Melbourne, is that teacher as content deliverer has almost no correlation to learning outcomes, but teacher as facilitator, so facilitator of learning, has like a 0.19% correlation to learning outcomes. But even better than that is if you can change the role of the teacher to activator of learning, which has a 0.9 correlation, or 0.6, and the role that means that the teacher is instead of just being a passive supervisor of learning, is actually asking the deeper level questions. They're providing mentorship. They're providing the motivation and engagement behind the learning platforms. And so in order to get massive learning gains at scale, we found that the role of the teacher actually needs to shift.
So I think there's a lot of use cases we see with teachers using video and YouTube actually in the classroom. When I was actually back in the U.S. last month, we brought together educators from around the world, and I was hearing a lot of personal stories just how teachers were using video to just expand upon the lecture and using it as a tool for engagement with the kids. And they were seeing this both from primary to secondary school kids, and so it's there's both, I think, in the lecture itself, but also the lesson. And I think the realization in a market like the U.S., we see that a lot of people are with camera phones actually making their own videos, and so I think for them it's a natural extension to actually then put that into the lesson. Here in India, Sri Ram, which is a school here in Gurgaon, it's not the teachers actually who are kind of bringing it into the classroom; it's the school itself, which is interesting. So I think a lot of cases I find in the U.S. it's some teacher, not the administrators. The teachers then thinking that I can actually find good use. And actually afterwards I was speaking to my mother who just retired from teaching, and I never realized actually she uses YouTube all the time. And so she gave me just more like personal examples. But I think you have these cases where someone's just thinking that it's good. But I think the case here is just quite interesting. Now it's at a school level, looking at actually bringing technology and video into the class.
So Rajiv, I'm surprised you didn't mention that the challenges you face are kind of or primarily teacher-driven or teacher-related, because teachers are impactful, very impactful in education. They are the drivers of it. So why did you say infrastructure?
Yeah, infrastructure is
that because of target market where you've gone?
So we are into schools. Infrastructure is a primary challenge. Then of course it comes. See, teachers will use any solution or technology provided it does two things. One, it saves their time. Two, it creates learning outcome. So if we are able to demonstrate that early enough during pilot, they will embrace it. So what's happening, unfortunately, especially in India, I have visited close to 1,000 schools over the last couple of years, that technology is being either sold or purchased as a just differentiator for the school. It has not been able to demonstrate to the teacher that it is helping teacher or it is creating learning outcome for the student. So any product and solution which is able to do this, teachers will buy it. That's what we are seeing, in whatever little evidence that we have over the last 1 year.
That's heartening to know. A little surprising, but makes good sense that you're able to prove outcomes so quickly, and then teachers are able to follow up on that and believe in those, and then commend the purchase if necessary. That's pretty impressive, I must say, because learning outcomes take time to prove, first of all. But getting into something, I'll come back to that later. I think one of the quandaries of bringing technology into education is that a lot of people have come up with this. This is somewhat provocative and relates to a relatively old school of thought, and which may or may not be agreeable to everyone, is that often you can only learn based on what you already know, and specifically after the age of 8. Once you've crossed that age, once the pot of brain is full with ideas, thoughts, concepts, philosophies, beyond that, learning occurs on the basis of memorization to a certain extent. Is technology creating an opportunity or a possibility that there will be less reliance on a critical element of memorization? First of all, is it important? Second, is that going to take it away? And are we going to rely on outsourced memory, so to say? This can be very debatable, so I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but I just want to bring it up and see who wants to discuss it quickly. And by the way, memorization different from rote learning, so we will not confuse those two.
So the question was actually, can technology move the student away from memorization? Yeah. I mean, so there's I worked on a program several years ago where we worked with a startup out of Hong Kong, and the gist of it was actually to get kids to think creatively. And so, and we're in hundreds of schools here in India, across Southeast Asia, Australia, and Taiwan. And the whole thing was actually, we gave kids a palette of cartoon characters. And it's like, you know these characters, and you kind of know the antics that they actually get up to, but today you are the screenwriter. You write the script, and then you go and animate it. And so what we were kind of seeing through this was, one, they were getting hands-on with technology, which was great, so everyone was endorsing that. But the other, I think the more interesting thing was just getting people to think creatively and to actually put that in through a technology output. And so we saw incredible benefit out of that. We had hundreds of thousands of actual animation videos actually created. What I also found pretty stunning was we had millions of people actually watching this. And so it wasn't just that they were doing it for the sake of doing it, but actually people also found the content compelling itself. And so out of that, the first year we just ran this as a pilot, and the second year was like we had schools begging to like bring it back. And they found that it was not just like an escape out of the class, but this was, they thought a key lesson to kind of creative writing and creative thinking.
So Sandeep, to build off that point, I mean, what we've seen from the global research is that there's still no replacement for memorization. In order to get to the higher level thinking, creative thinking skills, you have to be able to, have a baseline of content knowledge, and some of that does relate to memorization, some amount of short-term memorization or short-term memory retention, and there's no replacement for that. I think technology can be a real enabler to when you get to that second phase of after you have a baseline of content knowledge and you're beginning to get to critical thinking and creative thinking, to be able to think, well, how do I ask the deeper question, and how do I get the baseline information to answer my deep questions quicker, and then get to an even higher order thinking skill.
So that's useful, and I'd like to sort of leave that open, and because long-term debate on that one, but that's very useful. Tanmay, just switching gears to employability and assessment of employability. So using that as a means to get into higher education and understanding the role of technology in higher education. So if you can get us started in that direction, what do you think is the role of technology in assessing employability and other skills in higher education space?
Sure. In fact, it's a very interesting subject that you've touched upon. So one of the key trends which technology is bringing to the table, especially to do with higher education, is a lot of measurements are now becoming outcome based. I mean, especially to do with assessments. So companies are looking for candidates who could be fitted on the job right away. So the people want trained workforce and to recruit, and not put people on a training program after hiring them. And we see this massive trend shift. So we on our platform provide both kind of assessments. You can have knowledge-based assessments, or you can ask a potential candidate skill-based assessments. And we see a dramatic shift in companies looking to opt for skill-based assessments. So companies extensively use our simulators to test hands-on skills of people, whether it is programming, accounting, finance, knowledge, and all of that. So the good part is, now companies through technology, a platform like ours and some others, are able to effectively, cost-effectively, in a scalable way, are able to measure skills of people, which used to be extremely person-dependent, which technology has really filled in the gap. So in order to, let's say, hire a programmer which is like 4 years experienced, you would need one of your top senior guys to spend like 3-4 hours with the programmer, and in order to hire one, you would meet 10 such candidates, and which means, let's say, spending 20 to 30 hours of a senior programmer's time. Now, a technology can completely replace that and meet companies' objectives. So, we see, in terms of requirements perspective, a lot of shift in the industry where people are, or companies are looking for skilled workers, and now technology is able to serve them in an affordable, scalable way without any human intervention.
Very useful. So one of the ways that may be expressed is, just because you have a certificate doesn't mean you're skilled. Just because you have a skill, don't have a certificate doesn't mean you don't have the skill. So being able to measure skill using technology is very interesting for employability, etc. In higher education space, one of the things that everybody talks about is the emergence of MOOCs and SPOCs, massive open online courses, and small private online courses. So SPOCs is the next generation of MOOCs, so to say. Anyone want to comment on the one or two things? One, the effect of MOOCs and SPOCs on India, higher education, and second, particularly whether that is a sustainable trend, where we are headed with them.
So I can just give my views on that. I think the advent of MOOCs is a clear example of how a simple technology can really bring about a massive shift in the industry. So today, on Coursera's and the equivalent platforms, you have the best-in-class courses taught by best professors in the world, which used to be a dream for, especially students in India and some of these developing countries and economies, now accessible. If you're really a serious aspirant to do one such course, now there is this course on Coursera which is available for free online at your own convenience, and it has really democratized and dramatically shifted the way education content is disseminated, among aspirants, and maybe,
Yeah, I think that's just to build off that, I think one of the things that we've seen globally is that the value of content is just dramatically going down. Universities no longer can be sort of the holders of content. You don't need to go to a university library to look up a fact. That's true in the United States. It's true in India. And I think that we're just beginning to see the impacts of the sort of MOOC revolution, and even broader than that, the movement of open educational resources and the way that those are being streamed into classrooms in the higher education university context and also in K-12.
Yeah, I would just add on. I was talking to one of the CTO of open course platforms in US, and we had this interesting conversation that India has very large amount of human resources. So can India be the back office for education for blended learning, wherein open source content comes from wherever it is generated, but some amount of human blend is always necessary. So could we see thousands of instructors or delivering or assisting a lot of people in combination with MOOCs, right? Maybe there is that's how we could see it evolving. There is no early evidence of that yet, but I think creation of MOOC itself is very challenging. I've not seen a significant investment happening in India on that. It takes a lot of time and energy to create a high quality MOOC and put onto an online platform, while US universities are doing that. I think we are yet to see that happening at some scale in India.
Ben, any comments on that?
I was just going to say, I mean, amongst the different subject matters, I think in India we see a lot of activity around language learning. And there's a lot of growth in consumption actually on the platform for that type of content. But I think from a U.S. perspective, one of our success stories is Khan Academy, and I think having a local version of that in India is we're still waiting for that to develop. So I think there's open space for that, and kind of delving further into different subject matter and reaching large audiences through digital platforms.
Thank you, panelists, for sitting through this panel. Thank you for answering all the questions. We can go into greater detail one-on-one with the audience. I'm sure they have questions for you. Thank you, audience, for sitting through this, and hope it was useful.